People like you don't belong here. The words cut through the air like a cold blade. Naomi Carter froze for a split second, her manicured hand still holding the leather handle of her Louis Vuitton tote. The lobby of Summit Tech Global's Austin headquarters was bathed in warm afternoon light pouring through the glass facade, but in that moment, it felt like every beam dimmed. Greg Whitman, the floor manager, stood tall in his pressed shirt, a half-empty Dr. Pepper can dangling from his fingers. Without warning, he tilted it forward, and a wave of dark soda splashed over Naomi's perfect curls, sliding down the collar of her tailored black blazer, soaking into the crisp white blouse she'd picked for her husband's biggest board meeting of the quarter. Around them, nearly 24 employees froze mid-step. Some gasped, others instinctively reached for their phones. Somewhere in the back, the whir of the security camera shifted, catching the scene from a better angle. Naomi didn't shout. She didn't flinch. Instead, she glanced at the Rolex on her wrist. 14 minutes, she said quietly, as if speaking to herself. Greg smirked, as though he'd just proven some twisted point. What's that supposed to mean? Naomi's eyes didn't leave the second hand sweeping across her watch face. She simply smiled, a calm, almost dangerous smile. You'll find out. If you're watching this right now, you might be wondering how someone could humiliate a stranger like that, in front of the entire staff, and think they'd get away with it. Stick with me. Because in less than 14 minutes, the man holding that soda will be wishing he'd never opened it. And if stories like this make you want to see justice served, you might want to tap that follow and stay tuned. What happens next changes everything. Naomi took one step forward. The soda dripped onto the polished marble floor, each drop echoing in the suddenly silent lobby. 14 minutes. That's all it would take. The Texas sun was still high in the sky when Naomi Carter walked into Summit Tech Global's headquarters that Thursday afternoon. The building sat like a glass and steel crown in the heart of downtown Austin, 34 floors of polished ambition. Inside, the lobby was a modern cathedral of corporate power. White marble floors, brushed steel accents, and a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a five-star Manhattan hotel. Every detail screamed success. Every corner had a camera. Naomi wasn't just another visitor. At 5 feet 8 inches with a toned frame that came from early morning runs and a face that could stop traffic, she carried herself with a kind of quiet confidence that made people turn their heads. Her skin was a deep, rich mahogany that seemed to glow under the lobby's warm lighting, and her smile, when she chose to show it, was equal parts grace and warning. She wasn't here for a job interview or a casual lunch. She was here on business. Very important business. The sleek leather tote in her hand carried sealed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, destined for the desk of her husband, Marcus Carter, Summit Tech's CEO. Marcus had built the company from a startup in his garage to one of the most influential tech giants in the country. And today's board meeting could secure their biggest deal yet. Naomi had been to this building countless times. Security knew her. The executive floor knew her. She was photographed at company galas, featured in charity newsletters, and even appeared in Forbes alongside Marcus. But today, something was different. Behind the front desk sat a new receptionist, nervously clicking at her keyboard. Off to the side, leaning against the reception counter like he owned it, was Greg Whitman, the mid-level manager everyone knew for his loud voice and louder opinions. He had a reputation for cutting corners, throwing his weight around with junior staff, and making jokes that weren't funny to anyone but him. Naomi had heard Marcus mention him once, something about HR complaints brushed under the rug. Naomi stepped up to sign in, her visitor badge already pre-approved with top-level clearance. That's when Greg noticed her. His gaze swept her from head to toe, lingering a little too long, and something in his expression hardened. In his mind, she didn't belong here. Not in this lobby, not holding that bag, not walking with that kind of confidence. He didn't ask her name. He didn't ask her purpose. He reached for his Dr. Pepper. And in the next few minutes, he would make the biggest mistake of his career. Greg's voice boomed across the lobby before Naomi could even finish signing her name. Hey, did security just let anybody in here today? Heads turned. Conversations halted. The tapping of keyboards from the reception desk stopped cold. Naomi looked up slowly, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. Excuse me. Greg pushed off the counter, taking 2 slow, deliberate steps toward her. I've been here 10 years. I know every face that belongs in this building. And yours. Not one of them. The receptionist, her name tag read Kelly, shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Whitman, her badge is. Greg held up a hand. Save it. I know exactly what this is. People like her waltz in, pretend they're delivering something important, and before you know it, there's sensitive data walking right out the door. A few employees nearby exchanged uneasy glances. Naomi's grip tightened on her tote, but her voice stayed level. I have documents for the CEO. I'm expected upstairs. Greg smirked. Sure you are. Then, in a move that seemed almost slow motion to everyone watching, he twisted the cap off his 20-ounce Dr. Pepper and, with a deliberate tilt of his wrist, poured the soda over Naomi's head. The hiss of carbonation was followed by the sharp splash against her hair and silk blouse. Sticky liquid streamed down her face, soaking into the leather of her tote. Inside, the merger contracts, $300 million worth of corporate leverage, were now dripping onto the marble floor. Gasps broke the silence. Someone's phone camera was already up. A junior analyst whispered, "Oh my God." Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't wipe her face. She didn't shout. She simply glanced at the massive clock hanging behind the reception desk. 3 o'clock, she murmured. 17 minutes. Greg's smile widened, mistaking her composure for submission. See, folks. That's how you deal with a security threat. Quick. Decisive. Kelly looked torn, glancing between Naomi and the phone in her hand. The temptation to call upstairs was clear in her eyes, but Greg's presence loomed like a warning. An older security guard named Hank stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Mr. Whitman, maybe we ought to check her credentials before." "Before what?" Greg cut him off. "Before she slips past us and costs this company millions? Not on my watch." Naomi set her tote down carefully, opened it just enough to show the edge of a gold-embossed folder, and took out her phone. Her fingers moved with surgical precision as she began photographing everything. Greg's posture, the soda puddle, the bystanders. 15 minutes, she said quietly. The tension in the lobby shifted. Whatever was coming next, everyone knew they were about to witness a moment they wouldn't forget. The first to step forward was Mia Torres, the 26-year-old receptionist who'd been at Summit Tech for just over a year. Her brown eyes darted from Naomi's soaked blouse to Greg's smug grin. She had a headset draped around her neck, but her hands were clenched into fists. "Mr. Whitman," Mia began carefully. "Her badge is legit. She signed in under the CEO's." Greg's glare cut her off. "Mia, I've told you before. In this lobby, I decide who's legit." Naomi's gaze shifted toward Mia for just a second, a silent acknowledgement of the young woman's courage. But Mia hesitated, her confidence buckling under Greg's authority. She stepped back, her lips pressed together. From the far side of the lobby, Hank, the security guard, still hadn't moved. He was old school, a Vietnam vet turned building security, and he'd seen enough corporate nonsense in his day to smell trouble. He studied Naomi's calm stance and the way her eyes tracked every detail. That wasn't the body language of a trespasser. That was someone who knew she had the upper hand. Hank opened his mouth again. "Greg, maybe we just..." "Not another word," Greg barked, holding up a finger without even looking at him. Two junior marketing associates, Tara and Melissa, exchanged glances near the elevator bank. Tara's iPhone was already tilted in recording mode, her finger hovering over the live button for Instagram. Melissa mouthed, "Are you sure?" But Tara just whispered, "This is going to blow up." At a coffee table in the corner, Robert Chen, a mid-level financial analyst, lowered his cappuccino and frowned. He recognized Naomi from somewhere. Maybe a corporate gala, maybe an article in Business Insider. He didn't know her story, but something about this didn't add up. "Greg," Robert called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "What if she's telling the truth?" Greg turned, eyebrows raised. "What if she's not? Then we've saved the company a lot of money and embarrassment." But the irony wasn't lost on anyone, because right now, embarrassment was flooding the marble lobby in real time, witnessed by at least a dozen employees and, thanks to Tara's live feed, an audience far beyond these walls. Naomi checked her watch again. 13 minutes, she said softly. That phrase hung in the air like a countdown to detonation. Even those who had been passive moments ago now shifted uneasily, as if they were all standing on the edge of something about to erupt. And somewhere in the back, an elevator bell chimed, its arrival promising that whatever this was, it was far from over. Naomi's voice was low, but it sliced through the lobby like a sharp blade. 12 minutes, she murmured, glancing at her Rolex before tucking a damp strand of hair behind her ear. Greg Whitman laughed under his breath, a short, arrogant chuckle that made several people shift uncomfortably. 12 minutes until what? Your getaway driver shows up. He smirked, stepping closer. Or maybe you think your little act is gonna buy you sympathy. Naomi didn't flinch. 12 minutes until this building realizes just how bad you've screwed up. The words landed harder than anyone expected. Even Hank, leaning on his security post, felt his chest tighten. There was something about the way she said it, like she wasn't bluffing. Mia Torres's headset crackled faintly as the front desk phone lit up again. She glanced at the caller ID, Executive Office, 42nd floor, but her hand froze inches from the receiver. Greg noticed. Don't even think about answering that, he warned. Robert Chen took a slow sip of his coffee, eyes still locked on Naomi. He was piecing something together now. Her composure, her poise, the way she scanned the room, it wasn't just confidence. It was the posture of someone used to running the room, not being thrown out of it. Tara, still recording near the elevator, whispered to Melissa, "People online are asking who she is. Someone just commented they think she's married to." 7 minutes, Naomi interrupted, louder this time, and the words made Greg's jaw tighten. The tension was no longer just about security protocol. It was personal now. Greg's pride was on the line, his authority challenged in front of an audience that was growing by the second. He stepped right into Naomi's space, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You think you can waltz in here, dressed to impress, and tell me how this lobby runs? Not today." Naomi didn't move back. "And you think you can humiliate anyone who doesn't fit your idea of belonging here? Not anymore." Phones were up everywhere now, recording from multiple angles. The air in the lobby felt electric, like static before a storm. 5 minutes left on Naomi's unspoken countdown. Whatever was coming, everyone knew it was big. They just didn't know it was about to walk straight out of the elevator doors. The elevator pinged, a crisp, almost polite sound, but in the thick, charged air of the lobby, it landed like a gunshot. Every head turned. The brushed steel doors slid open, revealing a tall man in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than Greg Whitman's yearly wardrobe. His presence didn't just demand attention, it commanded it. It was Marcus Caldwell, CEO of Orion Dynamics. 6'3", broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with the calm authority of someone who had closed billion-dollar deals before breakfast. His shoes clicked against the marble as he stepped forward, scanning the room like a general entering a battlefield. And then his eyes locked on her. "Naomi." His voice was deep, steady, but underneath, there was something else. Concern, confusion, and rising anger. The entire lobby went silent. Even the faint hum of the HVAC seemed to fade. Naomi stood exactly as she had for the last 12 minutes, straight-backed, chin high, hair still damp from the soda dripping onto her silk blouse. She didn't rush to explain. She didn't point fingers. She simply said, "I brought the documents you asked for." Marcus's eyes flicked to the ruined leather portfolio in her hand, the brown stains seeping into the pages. He didn't need an explanation to understand what had happened. His jaw tightened, the faintest muscle twitch giving away the fury brewing beneath his controlled exterior. Greg tried to speak first. "Sir, there was a..." Marcus's hand went up. Not high. Not aggressive. Just enough to cut him off like a blade. "Don't talk yet. I need to understand why my wife is standing in my lobby, soaked in soda, surrounded by my employees holding phones like it's a reality TV show." Wife. The word hit the room like a thunderclap. Mia's hand flew to her mouth. Robert's coffee froze halfway to his lips. Tara's phone trembled slightly in her grip as the live stream comment section exploded. Greg's face lost all its color. "Sir, I didn't know." "That's right," Marcus said, stepping closer, his voice low but lethal. "You didn't know. You didn't ask. You just acted." The tension, already high, now pressed down like heavy air before a tornado. Naomi finally looked up at her husband. 3 minutes left," she said softly. Marcus's gaze swept the room one more time. "Then I suggest everyone here decides, very quickly, which side of this they want to be on. Because in 3 minutes, the real storm was coming." Marcus didn't waste time. His phone was in his hand before Greg could stammer another excuse. A quick flick of his thumb, and the security feed from the lobby appeared on screen. The footage was crystal clear. 4K cameras had been installed last quarter. There it was. Greg leaning in, smirking, shaking the Pepsi bottle just enough to make it fizz before pouring it over Naomi's head. The way the soda splashed, the way her papers slid across the marble in soggy defeat, the way he stood back with that satisfied little smirk. Every detail was right there, undeniable. Marcus turned the screen toward the growing circle of employees. In case anyone thinks this was a misunderstanding, he said, his tone razor-sharp, let's be sure we're all watching the same reality. Greg's Adam's apple bobbed as the color drained from his face. Mia glanced away, cheeks burning. Robert set his coffee down slowly, like any sudden movement might trigger an explosion. Naomi didn't flinch. She'd already lived the moment once. Seeing it replayed was just confirmation. Mr. Caldwell, Greg began, but Marcus cut him off. No. You don't speak. You don't explain. You listen. His voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of finality. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending termination. Hand your security badge to Jerome. The security guard, a solid, dependable man who'd been standing uncomfortably on the sidelines, stepped forward. His large hand opened expectantly. Greg hesitated for a fraction of a second before unhooking the badge from his belt. Marcus's gaze moved to Mia. You knew she had clearance. You said nothing. That's complicity. I was just following Greg's lead, Mia stammered. That's the problem, Marcus said. You followed arrogance instead of protocol. You're on suspension as well. HR will decide if you return. Gasps rippled through the room. This wasn't the usual corporate tap on the wrist. This was swift, public, and irreversible. Marcus turned slowly, making eye contact with each person in the lobby. And for the rest of you, every single one who stood here filming instead of intervening, you'll be attending mandatory bias and ethics training. Refuse, and you're done here. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly. Naomi glanced at her watch. 2 minutes, she said softly. Marcus stepped closer to Greg, so close that the manager had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. 2 minutes from now, I'll be upstairs explaining to the board why our merger documents were almost lost because of your ego and your ignorance. You should pray they're in a forgiving mood. But forgiveness wasn't on the agenda today. Just as the weight of Marcus's words settled over the lobby, the elevator chimed again. This time, the sound cut through the tension like a starter pistol. All eyes turned toward the brushed steel doors as they slid open with mechanical precision. Out stepped Evelyn Carter, Sterling Tech's chief operating officer. Tall, elegant, in a navy power suit that looked custom-tailored in Milan, she didn't need to raise her voice to command the room. The woman's mere presence was enough to shift the air. Her eyes swept over the scene, Greg pale and sweating, Mia frozen, Jerome standing guard, Naomi still dignified despite the drying soda stains on her cream silk blouse. Then Evelyn's gaze locked on Naomi, and her expression changed instantly, from businesslike neutrality to something sharp and protective. Naomi. Evelyn's voice carried both concern and familiarity. Naomi inclined her head politely. Evelyn. Greg blinked. You know her. Evelyn stepped forward, her heels clicking like a countdown. Greg, let me be very clear, Naomi is not just a visitor. She is Naomi Carter-Wells, Harvard Law, former senior partner at Benson & Crowe, current board member of 3 Fortune 500 companies, and, she let the pause hang like a guillotine, the wife of Sterling Tech's CEO. The silence hit like a punch. You could hear the hum of the lobby's AC system, the faint ding of someone's phone in the back. Greg's jaw dropped. Wait, what? Naomi's calm voice slid in, cold and surgical. That's right. And I was here to deliver critical merger contracts for a $400 million deal your CEO is finalizing today. A deal you nearly sabotaged because you thought humiliating me was more important than verifying my clearance. Phones that had been recording the confrontation were now clutched even tighter. What had been an embarrassing HR moment had just turned into career suicide for Greg, and a potential PR wildfire for the company. Marcus didn't let the moment pass. Everyone in this lobby just witnessed your arrogance nearly cost Sterling Tech hundreds of millions. And you didn't just target a VIP, you targeted the CEO's wife. He looked around the circle of employees. If you ever doubted how fast a career can end, watch closely. Evelyn nodded to Jerome. Escort Mr. Harris to the security desk. He's done here. Greg's protest died in his throat when Evelyn added, HR will send you the official termination papers by end of day. Don't bother coming back. As Jerome led him away, Naomi simply glanced at her watch and murmured, 1 minute late to the board meeting. Let's not make it 2. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Naomi wasn't just a victim anymore. She owned the room. The boardroom on Sterling Tech's 40th floor felt like it had been carved out of glass and steel. Sleek, sharp, and expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, but no one was admiring the view. Every seat around the mahogany conference table was filled, and the air buzzed with a mix of curiosity, discomfort, and anticipation. Naomi sat at the far end, beside her husband, Marcus Wells, the CEO. She was no longer the woman dripping soda in the lobby. Now, she was composed, commanding, and radiating a quiet power that made even the most seasoned executives shift in their seats. Marcus had already recounted what happened downstairs, but Naomi didn't jump in with anger or accusations. Instead, she opened a slim leather portfolio, glanced briefly at her notes, and spoke with measured precision. Let's skip the part where I list everything Greg did wrong, she began. We all know what happened. What matters now is what it exposed. The room was silent. What happened in that lobby wasn't just about one man's ignorance or arrogance, Naomi continued. It was about the systems here. Systems that make it easy for bias to override facts, that reward authority without accountability, and that leave your people untrained in the most basic principle of business, respect. Some executives exchanged glances. This wasn't the revenge speech they'd braced for. I'm not here to destroy Sterling Tech, Naomi said, leaning forward. I'm here to help you protect it. Because I promise you, if this happened to me, it has happened to others. Maybe to an intern, a contractor, a candidate you wanted to recruit but lost forever because someone decided they didn't belong. Her words cut deeper than shouting ever could. I'm proposing systemic reform. Not just bias training, but anonymous reporting systems, independent review panels, and diversity benchmarks tied directly to executive bonuses. She slid a printed proposal across the table. These changes won't just make Sterling Tech safer, they'll make it stronger. Inclusive companies outperform their competitors. That's not an opinion, that's data. Marcus nodded, reinforcing her point. This isn't about avoiding lawsuits, he said. It's about building a company where this never happens again. One by one, the initial defensiveness in the room gave way to something else, recognition. The shift was visible. This wasn't a vendetta. It was a blueprint. Naomi closed her portfolio. Revenge is easy. Reform is hard. But reform is what lasts. The board didn't just vote to implement her proposals, they voted unanimously. Downstairs, no one knew it yet, but Sterling Tech's culture had just turned a corner it could never go back from. Change didn't just stay trapped inside Sterling Tech's glass walls, it spilled out into the world like sunlight breaking through a storm. Within 24 hours of the board's unanimous vote, Marcus's PR team released a public statement. Not the usual carefully worded corporate non-apology, but a clear, unapologetic acknowledgement of what happened and exactly what was being done about it. The statement went viral before noon. News anchors repeated Naomi's line, "Revenge is easy. Reform is hard. But reform is what lasts." On morning shows and business podcasts, Twitter lit up with praise from employees across industries, some sharing their own experiences of bias and saying they wished their companies would act this decisively. By the end of the week, Sterling Tech wasn't just trending, it was being cited in Harvard Business Review as a case study in rapid cultural transformation. The ripple effect inside the company was immediate. The receptionist who had been too nervous to speak up during the incident emailed Naomi to thank her for creating a system where she now felt safe to do so. In the software engineering department, a quiet but brilliant developer who had never volunteered for leadership suddenly put her name in for a project lead position. In marketing, a junior copywriter pitched a bold new campaign celebrating Sterling Tech's diversity, a pitch that, 2 months earlier, would never have left her notebook. But the real shockwave came from outside. 5 other major tech firms called Sterling Tech's HR department requesting details about their new reforms. A nonprofit dedicated to workplace equity invited Naomi to keynote their national conference. A major client who had been considering pulling their contract renewed for another 3 years, citing the company's moral courage. Even Marcus was caught off guard when Sterling Tech's job applications spiked by 40% in just 2 weeks. Top-tier talent wanted in, not because of higher salaries, but because of the culture Naomi had helped create. Greg's name faded from conversation, but the systems his behavior exposed remained a cautionary tale in every new hire training session. Naomi's message, respect first, no exceptions, had become company policy, not just a slogan. And every time Naomi walked into the building, heads turned, not out of fear, but out of respect. The soda incident wasn't her legacy. The culture shift was. 6 months later, Sterling Tech didn't just look different, it felt different. The once sterile, quiet lobby now buzzed with energy. Digital displays near the entrance showcased real-time diversity metrics, employee spotlights, and upcoming community events. There were photos of teams from every background smiling together at hackathons, charity drives, and product launches. The vibe wasn't forced, it was genuine, lived in. Naomi stepped through the front doors one crisp Monday morning, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Instead of awkward glances, she was met with warm smiles and friendly nods from employees who now knew her not just as the CEO's wife, but as the catalyst for change. Inside the executive boardroom, Marcus was reviewing the company's quarterly results with a proud smile. Not only had revenue grown 12% compared to the same quarter last year, but employee satisfaction scores had climbed to 4.8 out of 5, the highest in company history. Turnover had dropped by more than half, saving millions in recruiting and training costs. Departments once plagued by quiet resentment now thrived. The engineering team had launched 2 major projects ahead of schedule, thanks in part to more collaborative leadership. Sales had closed 3 multi-million-dollar deals from clients who openly praised Sterling Tech's commitment to integrity and inclusion. Even the notoriously competitive product team had nominated their manager, a Latina who'd been passed over twice before, for an industry leadership award. But the most telling transformation wasn't in the numbers. It was in the stories. A junior developer shared how, for the first time in her career, she felt safe speaking up in meetings without being talked over. A veteran HR rep admitted she'd almost quit before the reforms but now felt proud to be part of a company that walked the talk. The security guard who had quietly stood by during the soda incident was now part of an internal respect task force that trained new hires in bias awareness. Naomi had also taken her message outside Sterling Tech. She spoke at 3 major conferences, consulted with other corporations on reform strategies, and even guest lectured at a business ethics class at Stanford. Each time, she reminded audiences of the same truth. Systems change when people with power decide they must. And as she walked past a group of interns laughing near the coffee bar that morning, she knew something for certain. What started as an act of humiliation had become a blueprint for hope. Naomi stood at the edge of the stage, the spotlight warm on her face. The audience, hundreds of business leaders, students, and community organizers, sat in absolute silence, waiting for her final words. She glanced down at her notes, then closed the folder. "You know," she began, her voice calm but steady, "when I walked into that lobby 6 months ago, I didn't expect to be drenched in soda. I didn't expect to be humiliated in front of strangers. But I also didn't expect that moment to become the spark for something much bigger than me." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Here's the truth. We all have moments where we're wronged, where someone underestimates us, disrespects us, or tries to strip away our dignity. And in those moments, revenge is the easiest option. But here's the problem. Revenge ends the moment you take it. Busian. Reform keeps working long after you've walked away. A murmur of agreement rolled through the crowd. Changing a culture, Naomi continued, means facing the hard truth that systems are built by people, and only people can rebuild them. It means standing your ground, even when your voice shakes. It means holding others accountable, but also giving them the tools to do better. She looked out over the audience, making eye contact with as many faces as she could. Maybe you're a CEO. Maybe you're an intern. Maybe you're a student who's been told you don't belong in the room. I'm here to tell you, you do. And not only do you belong, but you have the power to change the room for the next person who walks in after you. The applause started softly, then grew until it filled the hall. Naomi let it wash over her for a moment, then added one last thought. If this story moved you, don't just feel inspired for a moment. Act on it. Share it. Start the conversation in your workplace, your school, your community. And if you want to hear more stories of people who turned moments of injustice into lasting change, stick around. Follow our journey. Because the more we talk about this, the less we'll need to. She stepped back from the microphone as the crowd rose to its feet. Somewhere in the audience, a young woman was already opening her phone, ready to share Naomi's story with the world. And that's how change spreads. One story at a time.